She had grown up in a small town where everyone seemed to know everyone else. And yet, somehow, she always felt invisible. The streets were dusty, lined with wooden fences and small shops with signs swaying gently in the wind. Children laughed while playing on the uneven sidewalks, and neighbors greeted each other warmly as they passed by. Life in the town seemed simple, even calm, but for her, it was a life full of silent struggles. Behind her polite smiles and the soft tone of her voice, she carried memories and worries that no one could see. She had learned to hide her pain, tucking it away deep inside, like a fragile glass kept in a safe place, away from prying eyes. Every morning, she woke before the sun rose, feeling the cool air of the early hours brushing her skin. She would make herself a cup of tea, standing by the window as the first light touched the rooftops. The town would slowly come alive. Shopkeepers opening their stores, horses clattering along the cobbled streets, and the distant sound of a train whistle in the distance. For the people around her, it was a normal day. But for her, it was another day of hiding behind a mask. Her neighbors and friends saw her as cheerful and kind, always ready to lend a hand, always ready with a smile. But the truth was far more complicated. She had learned to be strong on the outside because the world did not wait for anyone to heal. Her home was small but cozy. The wooden walls smelled faintly of lavender and old books, a smell that reminded her of safety and comfort. She kept her little garden neatly trimmed, and every plant seemed to thrive under her care. Taking care of something living gave her a sense of purpose, a small corner of the world where she could be in control. She would talk to her plants as if they could hear her, whispering stories and secrets that she could not share with anyone else. Sometimes, she thought the flowers understood her, that they bent gently toward her, as if listening to her heart. In those moments, she felt less alone. Despite this quiet life, shadows of the past often crept into her thoughts. She remembered moments of betrayal and disappointment, times when she had trusted someone and been hurt. The memories were sharp like broken glass, and sometimes she felt the sting even years later. To protect herself, she had learned to build walls around her heart. She laughed when others laughed, cried silently when she felt pain, and moved through life carefully, step by step. It was exhausting, but it had become her way of surviving. No one needed to know how heavy her heart felt behind the smiles. Her routines gave her a sense of safety. Every morning, she would walk to the small bakery near the edge of town. The baker always greeted her with a cheerful smile, handing her bread that smelled of warmth and sweetness. She would nod politely, thanking him, and then continue on her way to her chores or errands. These little routines kept her grounded, kept her busy enough to not think too much about the memories that sometimes surfaced uninvited. She liked the rhythm of the town, the familiar sounds, the gentle interactions, the sense that life continued steadily, even when she felt uncertain inside. Nearby, the cowboy lived in a small ranch just outside the town. He was known among the townspeople for his strength and kindness. His hands were calloused from years of hard work, yet his touch was gentle when he helped someone in need. He preferred the quiet of the open fields to the chatter of the town, but he always kept an eye on those who might need help. There were stories about him how he once rescued a neighbor's horse trapped in the river, how he always offered assistance without asking for anything in return, but he never sought attention for his deeds. People respected him quietly, and many admired his courage and integrity. Though their paths had not yet crossed, their lives were moving toward each other. She often saw him from a distance, riding his horse across the fields, the sun casting a golden glow over his broad shoulders. There was something calm about his presence, something that made the world feel safer, even from afar. She didn't know him personally, but she felt a quiet recognition, a sense that someone like him existed in her life, someone who could understand strength and kindness at the same time. Her days were not all lonely, though she often felt alone. She had friends she laughed with at the market, neighbors she exchanged small conversations with, and family who cared in their own ways. Yet, no one knew the depth of the struggles she hid. She had learned to share only pieces of herself that were easy for others to accept. Vulnerability had always felt dangerous to her, like stepping on fragile ice. She had been hurt before when she showed even a small part of her true self, so she had learned to guard her heart carefully. Evenings were her favorite time. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, she would sit on the porch of her little home and watch the town settle into quiet. The streets would empty. The children would retreat indoors, and a gentle breeze would carry the scent of grass and earth. In these moments, she allowed herself to breathe freely. She thought about her dreams, about the life she wished she could live without fear. Though she had learned to hide her tears, in the soft silence of evening, she sometimes let a few fall. They were private, unobserved, and for her, necessary. Despite her careful routines and quiet life, she felt that something was missing. A part of her longed for connection, for someone who could see the real her, not just the smile, not just the cheerful chatter, but the heart that had been through pain and survived. She wanted someone who could understand without judgment, someone who could be a steady presence in a world that often felt uncertain. She didn't know it yet, but that someone was about to appear, someone whose courage and kindness would slowly draw her out of the shadows. The town itself seemed unaware of her inner world. People went about their lives, talking about crops, horses, weather, and the small dramas that filled daily life. No one noticed the quiet battles she fought within herself. She had become a master at hiding her emotions, at blending in so completely that no one could guess the depth of her struggles. And yet, beneath the careful control, her heart remained tender, capable of love, trust, and hope, even if she had buried those feelings under years of caution. One afternoon, as she walked along the dirt road leading to the edge of town, she felt a strange sense of anticipation. The wind carried a faint scent of horses and hay, and the sun warmed her face. She paused to look at the fields stretching toward the horizon, imagining the freedom of riding a horse, of letting go of all the fears that held her back. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself a small spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to life than hiding and surviving. Maybe there was a chance for healing, for trust, for connection. And so, life in the small town continued, quiet but full of hidden emotions. She moved through her days with care, tending to her chores, smiling at neighbors, and keeping her inner world locked away. But the threads of her life were shifting. The world she had known was about to change in ways she could not yet imagine, bringing someone into her life who would see her tears, hear her fears, and slowly help her find a place where she could feel safe again. In that small town, amidst dusty streets and quiet routines, the stage was set. A life that seemed ordinary was quietly waiting for extraordinary moments. Moments of courage, trust, and unexpected kindness that would forever alter the path she had walked so carefully. She did not know it yet. But soon, she would meet someone whose presence would change everything. Someone who would see her hidden tears and, with gentle hands and a strong heart, begin to heal them. The evening was quiet, almost too quiet. The sun had dipped low behind the hills, and long shadows stretched across the dusty streets of the town. She walked along the edge of the road, her heart beating a little faster than usual. There was a strange feeling in the air, like something was about to happen. She couldn't explain it, but the unease crept into her chest, making her steps feel heavier. The town that usually felt safe now seemed different, almost unfamiliar. Every rustle of leaves, every creak of a fence post made her pause and look around. She tried to calm herself. "It's nothing," she whispered under her breath. She tightened her grip on the small bag she carried and kept moving, forcing her legs to continue. But the feeling wouldn't go away. Something in the shadows seemed to watch her, and her chest tightened with old fears she thought she had left behind. Memories of moments when she had been hurt, moments when she had trusted someone only to be betrayed, came rushing back. She had learned to be careful, to protect herself. But tonight, fear had found her again. It started with a sound, a soft, deliberate step behind her. She froze, her heart leaping into her throat. She didn't want to look back, but instinct made her turn. A man emerged from the shadows, his expression unreadable. Her stomach sank. Something about him felt threatening, though she could not explain why. She had encountered people like him before, people who took advantage of kindness. People who caused pain instead of offering help. Her breath caught, and she stepped back, trying to find a way to escape. "Evening," the man said, his voice low and calm, but there was an edge to it that made her skin crawl. She didn't respond. She tried to walk faster, but he matched her pace easily, moving beside her. Panic started to rise in her chest. Her mind raced, thinking of the ways she could get away, the streets she could turn down, the houses she could run toward. But the road was empty, and the man seemed to anticipate her every move. She had never felt so small, so vulnerable in her life. Just when fear threatened to overwhelm her, a voice called out from behind. "Hey, leave her alone!" It was firm, steady, and full of authority. The man froze for a moment, glancing toward the source of the voice. Before he could react, a tall figure emerged from the fading light, riding a horse with confident ease. It was the cowboy. His eyes were calm but alert, and the strength in his presence seemed to fill the empty street. There was no hesitation in his movements. He stepped closer to her, placing himself between her and the man. The man hesitated, then sneered. "This isn't your business," he said, trying to sound threatening. But the cowboy's calm gaze did not waver. "It is now," he replied. His voice was firm, but there was no anger, only steady confidence. The tension in the air was thick, and she could feel her pulse racing. She had never seen someone approach danger with such calm authority. In that moment, a small part of her felt relief, a flicker of hope that maybe she was not as alone as she had always believed. The cowboy dismounted slowly, keeping his eyes on the man. Every movement was deliberate, careful, and measured. She watched him, amazed at the quiet strength he exuded. He didn't rush. He didn't shout, yet the presence he carried seemed to shift the balance. The man's sneer faltered, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. He could sense that this was not someone to challenge, not someone to underestimate. The cowboy's calm confidence spoke louder than any words could. "You need to leave," the cowboy said again, his voice steady and unwavering. The man looked between them, weighing his options. He could see that the cowboy was not just a stranger, he was someone who would act if necessary, someone who could protect. Slowly, reluctantly, the man backed away, muttering something under his breath. With a last glare, he turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving the street quiet once more. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her legs felt weak, and she leaned slightly against a nearby fence. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, tears she had fought to keep hidden for years. But now, in the safety of his presence, she allowed them to fall. The cowboy noticed, but he did not speak. He simply stood there, steady and calm, giving her the space she needed to release the fear that had built up inside. "Finally," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Thank you." It was a simple phrase, but it carried the weight of everything she had felt in that moment. The fear, the relief, the gratitude. The cowboy nodded slightly, a quiet acknowledgement, and said nothing more. Sometimes, just being there, just standing by someone when they needed protection, was enough. He guided her gently to the other side of the street, away from the shadows, and toward a safer path. She noticed how careful he was, how he moved with a quiet strength that did not intimidate, but reassured. Every small gesture, the way he adjusted his stance to block the street, the way he kept his eyes on her rather than on the shadows, made her feel safer than she had felt in years. She realized, with a mix of wonder and relief, that trust could exist even after so many years of fear. As they walked together toward the brighter streets of the town, she found herself speaking, her voice hesitant at first. She told him a little about why she had been so afraid, about the past that had made her cautious. The cowboy listened without interrupting, without judgment, simply offering his attention. It was a new experience for her, someone who did not dismiss her fears, someone who did not make her feel weak for having them. She had spent so long hiding. But now, she felt the beginnings of a connection that was built on respect and care. The sky had grown darker, stars beginning to appear above. The town was quiet, except for the occasional creak of a gate or the distant sound of a horse. She felt the tension of the encounter slowly melt away, replaced by a calm she had not known she could feel. It was as if the fear that had followed her for so long had met its match in the cowboy's steady presence. For the first time, she allowed herself to breathe fully, to feel safe without pretense. He did not rush her, and he did not ask for anything in return. They reached the small bridge at the edge of town, a place where she often paused on her walks. She stopped, looking down at the water below, the moonlight reflecting off its surface. Her voice was barely audible as she said, I don't know how to thank you." The cowboy smiled softly, a small gesture that carried warmth and reassurance. "You don't have to," he said simply. "Just be safe. That's enough." She realized that it was more than enough. In that moment, she understood something profound. Trust was not given lightly, and yet it could be offered without expectation. The cowboy had acted without needing anything in return, purely out of care and courage. It was a lesson she had not realized she needed, a quiet reminder that not everyone intended harm, that some people truly sought to protect and to help. As they parted ways, she felt a strange mix of emotions. Fear had been replaced by relief, anxiety by a quiet curiosity, and isolation by the faintest hint of connection. She didn't know the cowboy well, but she felt that her life had shifted in a subtle, irreversible way. Someone had seen her fear. Someone had acted with kindness and courage, and she had survived the encounter, stronger than she had been before. Walking home, she replayed the evening in her mind, noticing small details, the way the cowboy had stood, the calm in his voice, the quiet assurance in his movements. She realized that strength was not always loud or aggressive. Sometimes, it was quiet, steady, and unwavering. Sometimes, it was the presence of someone who would stand beside you when the world seemed threatening. She carried that thought with her as she entered her home, feeling the warmth of safety wrap around her like a soft blanket. That night, she sat by her window, looking at the stars above. She felt a strange sense of hope, the first real hope she had felt in years. The encounter with danger had reminded her of her own vulnerability, but it had also introduced her to the possibility of trust. She thought of the cowboy, not just as a rescuer, but as a symbol of quiet courage, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, someone could stand by her side. And so, her life continued, but something had changed. She moved through the town with a new awareness, a cautious optimism that perhaps not all encounters led to pain. Fear still lingered, as it always would. But now it had met strength, and she knew that sometimes, strength came from unexpected places. That night, she allowed herself to imagine a life where fear did not dictate every step, a life where she could trust, even if only a little, and perhaps, just perhaps, find the connection she had longed for. The night air was cool and still. carrying the faint scent of grass and earth from the nearby fields. She had walked home slowly after the encounter, her heart still pounding from the fear that had gripped her earlier. But now, standing in the quiet of her little home, she felt a strange mixture of relief and unease. Relief, because she had been saved, and unease, because her emotions were raw and unfamiliar. For years, she had buried her fears, hiding them behind polite smiles and quiet resilience. Yet now, she felt them pressing against her, demanding to be acknowledged. She sat by her window, looking out at the moonlit streets, trying to calm herself. The events of the evening played over and over in her mind. The man in the shadows, the sudden panic, the overwhelming sense of vulnerability. It had been too much. And then, the cowboy had appeared. He had acted so calmly, so confidently, and yet so gently. There was something about him that made her feel safe, even though she had never met him before. That safety was unfamiliar, almost frightening in its intensity. Her thoughts drifted to the moment when he had stood between her and the threat. She remembered the way his eyes had never wavered, the way his voice had been firm, but not angry. He had not shouted or demanded. He had simply been there, a steady presence that filled the empty street. She realized that she had trusted him instantly, something she had not done in years. That realization both comforted and frightened her. She had learned to guard her heart carefully, to avoid letting anyone in, and yet, in that brief moment, she had done exactly that. The fear she had carried for so long began to surface, along with emotions she could no longer ignore. She thought of all the times she had been hurt, all the moments when she had trusted someone only to be disappointed. The memories were sharp, like small cuts that refused to heal completely. She had buried them deep, telling herself that showing vulnerability was dangerous. But now, in the quiet of her home, she could not keep the walls up any longer. She needed to release the tension, to acknowledge the feelings that had been trapped inside for so long. The next day, she found herself walking toward the small open field at the edge of town, a place where she often went to think. She wanted to see him again, not because she expected anything, but because she felt the need to express what she could not keep inside. The cowboy was already there, tending to a small fire he had lit for warmth. When he saw her approaching, he smiled gently. A simple gesture that made her feel welcome without pressure. She hesitated, unsure if she could find the words to explain the storm of emotions inside her. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling slightly. I don't know how to explain it," she began, struggling to form the sentences that had been trapped in her chest for so long. "I've spent so many years hiding my fear, hiding my tears. I thought I had to be strong all the time, that showing any weakness would make me unsafe. But last night, you saved me, and I realized I've been holding so much inside that I don't even know how to let go." The cowboy listened without interrupting, his eyes calm and steady. He didn't rush her, didn't offer advice or judgment. He simply let her speak, giving her the space to release her feelings. That alone was more than she could have expected. Most people had either dismissed her emotions or made her feel ashamed for having them. But he was different. He respected her vulnerability, offering her a safe space without asking for anything in return. Tears began to fall. The kind of tears she had hidden for years. She had believed that showing them would make her weak, but in this moment, they felt like strength. She was finally allowing herself to be human, to acknowledge the fears and pain she had carried alone for so long. The cowboy did not flinch, did not try to stop her. He simply remained there, a steady presence, letting her know without words that it was safe to let go. I've never trusted anyone like this before," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm scared, but I don't want to hide anymore. I don't want to keep my feelings locked away. I just don't know how to start." Her words hung in the cool air, fragile but honest. She had never spoken like this to anyone. Opening up had always felt impossible. Yet here she was, letting someone see the parts of her she had kept hidden for so long. The cowboy finally spoke, his voice gentle, yet steady. "You don't have to know how to start," he said. "You don't have to have all the answers. The important thing is that you're willing to try. That's courage. That's strength. And you've already shown both, just by being here and speaking your truth." His words were simple, but they carried weight. For the first time, she felt seen, understood, and supported in a way that went beyond mere words. She took a deep breath, feeling some of the tension in her chest ease. It was strange. This feeling of being vulnerable, yet safe at the same time. She realized that trust could exist, even after years of disappointment and pain. It didn't happen easily, and it didn't happen quickly. But it was possible. And in that moment, she allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, she could let someone into her life without fear. They walked together through the open field, the fire crackling softly behind them, the stars beginning to twinkle above. She felt a sense of calm she had not experienced in years. For the first time, she could imagine a life where she didn't have to hide every emotion, where fear didn't control every step. The cowboy's presence was a reminder that kindness and courage could exist even in a world that often seemed harsh and unforgiving. As they reached the edge of the field, she stopped and looked at him, her heart pounding. "Promise me something," she said, her voice trembling. "Promise me. You won't hurt me. I can't handle being hurt again. I've been so careful, but I don't want to be afraid anymore. I just want to feel safe." The words felt heavy, but she spoke them anyway. It was the first time she had admitted her fear so openly, and saying it aloud made it feel real. The cowboy looked at her, his eyes steady and calm. "I promise," he said simply. "I will never hurt you. I'll protect you, and I'll respect you. That's all I can do, and it's all I will ever do." His voice carried sincerity, and she believed him. For the first time in a long while, she felt that someone could be trusted. That someone could see her pain and respond with care instead of harm. The promise was simple, yet it meant everything. Tears continued to fall, but they were different now. They were no longer just tears of fear or sorrow. They were tears of relief, of hope, of something new beginning. She realized that opening up didn't make her weak, it made her human, it made her strong, and she had taken the first step toward allowing herself to trust again. The cowboy did not rush her, did not expect anything from her. He simply stood there, a steady presence, letting her know that it was okay to be vulnerable. The night grew darker, but the stars shone brightly above them. She felt a sense of peace she had not known for years. The fear that had once controlled her thoughts and actions had been met with courage, care, and understanding. And though she knew the journey ahead would not always be easy, she also knew that she was no longer alone. Someone had seen her tears, heard her fears, and offered her the safety she had longed for. As they walked back toward the town together, she felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She realized that trust was not given lightly, and it was not always easy to find, but it was possible. And she had found it, even if only for this moment, in the presence of someone who had promised to protect her. The evening had changed something in her, something deep inside. She knew that she had taken a small but significant step toward healing, toward opening her heart to the possibility of connection. And so, the night passed quietly, filled with small gestures of understanding, kindness, and care. She went to bed that night with a sense of hope that had been missing from her life for far too long. The promise he had made echoed in her mind. A simple but powerful reminder that trust could exist, that courage could be met with care, and that even the deepest fears could begin to heal with the right presence beside her. The days that followed were quiet but filled with small, meaningful moments that slowly began to change her life. She continued her routines, walking through the town, tending to her garden, and helping her neighbors as she always had. Yet, now, there was a new awareness within her. She noticed the gentle ways the cowboy had become a presence in her life, the small gestures that spoke volumes. It wasn't just that he had saved her once, it was the way he continued to be there without forcing himself into her world. The way he offered help without asking for anything in return. She began to see him more often, sometimes riding past her home on his horse, sometimes appearing when she least expected it, but needed it the most. He never intruded, never demanded attention. But his presence was comforting, like a steady heartbeat in the background of her life. At first, she felt hesitant, unsure if she could trust this kindness. She had spent years learning that trust could lead to pain, that being vulnerable often ended in disappointment. Yet, something about the cowboy was different. He moved through the world with calm confidence, and there was no trace of deceit or selfishness in him. One afternoon, he offered to help her carry water from the well. At first, she refused politely, embarrassed by the thought of needing assistance. But he smiled, a small, genuine smile that made her feel at ease, and insisted. Together, they walked to the well, the sun warm on their faces, and the air filled with the faint scent of wildflowers. As they carried the buckets, they spoke quietly, sharing simple stories about their lives, their routines, and the little joys they found in each day. It was not a grand conversation, but it was enough to make her feel connected, enough to let her guard down just a little. Through these small moments, she began to notice how much she had been missing by keeping her heart closed. She realized that it wasn't weakness to rely on someone else, that accepting help didn't mean she was powerless. The cowboy's quiet presence taught her that strength could exist alongside vulnerability, that asking for support could be an act of courage. Each day, she felt a little braver, a little more willing to let her true feelings show. One morning, they walked together along a dirt path leading to the hills outside the town. The air was fresh, and the sunlight danced across the fields, making the grass shimmer. She felt a sense of freedom in that open space, a freedom she had not experienced in years. She began to speak more openly, telling him stories from her past, the struggles she had faced, and the dreams she had quietly held on to. The cowboy listened patiently, never interrupting, never judging. He asked gentle questions that encouraged her to continue, his calm presence making it safe for her to speak. In return, he shared pieces of his own life. He spoke of the work on his ranch, the quiet satisfaction of caring for the land and the animals, and the simple pleasures that filled his days. She found herself smiling, laughing even, at some of his stories. It was a new feeling for her, this lightness in her chest, the way joy could exist alongside fear. For years, she had thought happiness was fleeting, something she could never truly hold. But now, with him, it felt real and possible. Their time together was not always easy, though. Sometimes, old fears would resurface, triggered by a word, a glance, or a memory. On those days, she would retreat slightly, hesitant to let him in. Yet, he never pressured her. He remained patient, giving her the space she needed, showing her that trust was a choice, not an obligation. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, she began to see that she could rely on him without fear, that his presence was a safe harbor she could return to whenever the world became too overwhelming. Even simple chores became opportunities for connection. She remembered the day they repaired a broken fence together. At first, the work seemed tedious, but as they hammered, measured, and adjusted, they found rhythm and laughter in the effort. He offered guidance without condescension, encouragement without pressure. She realized that these small acts of care were a form of love, steady, patient, and consistent. It was different from the hurried, dramatic gestures she had seen before. This was quieter, deeper, and far more enduring. She also began to notice changes within herself. The fear that had once consumed her no longer held the same power. She felt stronger, more capable of facing the world. She allowed herself to smile more freely, to laugh without restraint, to cry without shame. Her heart, which had been so guarded, was slowly opening, learning that kindness and courage could exist in the same person. The cowboy had shown her that safety was not just the absence of danger, but the presence of someone who truly cared. One evening, they sat together on a hill overlooking the town. The sky, painted in shades of pink and orange. She leaned back against the soft grass, feeling the warmth of the sun and the quiet comfort of his presence. They spoke little, letting the moment stretch between them like a calm river. She realized that healing was not sudden or dramatic. It was quiet, gentle, and patient. And in this quiet, she found a sense of peace that she had never known before. As days turned into weeks, she noticed the small ways her life had begun to change. She felt less burdened by past fears, more willing to take risks, and more open to forming connections with others. Her interactions with neighbors became warmer, her smiles more genuine, and her laughter more frequent. She began to see that courage was not only about facing danger but also about facing one's own heart. She was learning to trust herself as much as she was learning to trust him. The cowboy remained a steady presence throughout, never asking for recognition, never seeking praise. He simply existed in her life in a way that allowed her to grow and heal. He taught her that true strength was not always loud or aggressive. It could be quiet, patient, and through this steady presence, she began to reclaim parts of herself she had long thought lost. Her confidence, her joy, and her belief in the goodness of people. One afternoon, she found herself standing by the river, skipping stones across the water. The cowboy joined her, showing her how to make the stones bounce just right. They laughed together, the sound echoing across the quiet water. She realized that she was no longer afraid to be herself, no longer afraid to show joy or share her thoughts. The simple act of spending time with someone who respected and cared for her had transformed her view of the world. It was a reminder that healing often came not from dramatic events, but from small, consistent acts of care and presence. Through all of this, she discovered the importance of patience, both for herself and for others. She learned that healing could not be rushed, that trust could not be demanded, and that true connection grew slowly, nurtured by understanding and care. The cowboy showed her this through his actions, teaching her that love and friendship were built on respect, patience, and a willingness to stand by someone without expectation. As the sun set on another day, she felt a quiet sense of gratitude. She had been through fear, pain, and loneliness. Yet she was beginning to experience something new. Hope. She realized that the cowboy had not only protected her from danger but had also helped her protect her own heart. His steady presence had given her the courage to face her fears, to embrace vulnerability, and to begin the journey of healing. And so, life continued in the small town. Ordinary in appearance, but extraordinary in the changes it had brought within her. She moved through her days with a sense of purpose and a quiet confidence. The tears she had once hidden were now allowed to flow when needed. The laughter she had suppressed now felt natural, and the fear that had once controlled her life had begun to loosen its grip. She knew that challenges would still come, but she also knew that she was no longer alone. In the presence of someone who offered steady care and unwavering respect, she discovered the true meaning of strength and healing. It was not about perfection or bravery in every moment, but about allowing oneself to be human, to trust, and to open one's heart slowly, one small step at a time. And in this journey, she found something she had longed for her entire life. A safe place to be herself, a connection that nurtured her soul, and the courage to believe in the goodness of people once again. The morning sun rose slowly over the small town, casting a warm, golden glow across the rooftops and streets. She woke, feeling a sense of calm she hadn't known in years. Her heart, once heavy with fear and doubt, now carried a quiet strength. The days of hiding her emotions and masking her pain felt like a distant memory. She had learned, slowly and patiently, that trust could exist, that courage could coexist with vulnerability, and that someone could truly see her without judgment. Today, she felt ready to embrace life in a way she had never dared before. She stepped outside, breathing in the fresh morning air. The streets were quiet, save for the soft clatter of hooves from the cowboy riding past. He greeted her with a small nod and a gentle smile, a simple gesture that had come to mean more than words ever could. In that smile, she saw the constancy of his presence, the quiet reliability that had supported her through fear and uncertainty. She realized that trust was not something demanded, it was nurtured over time through small, consistent acts of care. And he had nurtured it patiently, without expectation or rush. The day stretched ahead with ordinary tasks, yet everything felt different. She tended to her garden, feeling the earth beneath her fingers, planting seeds that would grow and bloom, just as she had learned to grow in the warmth of understanding and care. She greeted her neighbors with genuine smiles, laughed at the children playing in the streets, and felt a lightness in her step that had long been absent. She had discovered that healing was not an event but a journey, and each small moment was a step toward wholeness. Later, she met the cowboy by the river where they had spent time together before. The water reflected the bright sunlight, sparkling like tiny diamonds. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the flow of the river, feeling the gentle rhythm of nature around them. There was no need for words. The quiet companionship spoke volumes. She realized that safety and trust were not always loud or dramatic. They were often found in moments like this, in steady presence, in shared silence, and in simple gestures of care. She thought about all that had happened over the past weeks. She remembered the fear in her chest when the stranger had threatened her, the panic that had made her feel small and vulnerable. And then she remembered the cowboy, standing firmly between her and the danger, offering protection and calm without hesitation. That moment had been the beginning, but the real transformation had happened slowly, in small, gentle ways. She had learned to allow herself to feel, to open her heart cautiously, and to accept kindness without fear. "I never thought I could feel this safe again," she said softly, almost to herself. The cowboy looked at her, his expression calm and steady. "You deserve to feel safe," he replied simply, "and you deserve to be seen for who you are, not just the part you show the world." His words carried a depth that touched her heart. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly understood, not just protected, but accepted completely. It was a realization that filled her with quiet joy. Over the next few hours, they walked through the fields together, talking about life, dreams, and the little things that made each day meaningful. She laughed freely, without fear of judgment, and she cried freely, without fear of rejection. Each emotion was welcomed, each expression of self accepted. The burden she had carried for so long, the fear, the anxiety, the constant need to hide, felt lighter with every step. She had discovered that trust and love were not things to be feared, but gifts to be nurtured carefully and openly. The townspeople began to notice a change in her. She moved with confidence, spoke with warmth, and carried herself with a quiet dignity that had not been present before. People who had known her for years remarked on the new light in her eyes, the genuine smile that seemed to come from deep within. She realized that her journey of healing was visible, not just in her actions but in the way she carried herself. Trust and kindness, once feared as vulnerabilities, had become her strength. As evening approached, they returned to the hill overlooking the town. The sky was painted in shades of pink, orange, and purple, and the soft breeze carried the scent of grass and wildflowers. She sat beside the cowboy, feeling the weight of the day and the lightness of her heart at the same time. "I've learned so much," she said, her voice gentle. "I've learned that being vulnerable isn't weakness, that trust isn't something to be afraid of, and that courage doesn't mean being unafraid, it means moving forward even when you are afraid." The cowboy nodded, his gaze steady. "You've learned well," he said. "And you've done it all yourself. I've only walked beside you. The strength was always within you. You just needed to believe in it." His words were simple, but they resonated deeply. She realized that true healing was not about someone saving her completely, it was about walking together, supporting each other, and allowing her own strength to emerge naturally. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the fields. The colors of the sky mirrored the journey she had taken from fear and darkness to hope and light. She thought about the promise she had asked for long ago, the one that had seemed so fragile in the face of her fears. "Promise me, you won't hurt me." That promise had been kept in every action, every word, every moment of patience and care. And now, she felt the full weight of its truth. Trust had been earned, not just given, and she had experienced its power firsthand. As night fell, the stars appeared, twinkling like tiny beacons of hope in the dark sky. She looked up, feeling a sense of gratitude and peace she had never known. The tears that fell now were not of fear or sorrow, they were tears of relief, hope, and joy. She realized that she had been holding herself back for so long, hiding from the world and from herself. But now, she could face life fully, with courage, with trust, and with an open heart. The cowboy remained beside her, a constant and steady presence. She knew that life would still have challenges, that fear and doubt might still appear from time to time, but she also knew that she had the tools, the courage, and the support to face them. She was no longer alone in her journey. She had discovered that connection, kindness, and steady care could transform even the deepest fears into strength and hope. She took a deep breath, feeling the cool night air fill her lungs, and turned to him with a soft smile. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for being here, for listening, for showing me that it's okay to trust and to feel." The cowboy smiled back, a quiet acknowledgement, without words, because words were not always needed. The bond between them was clear in their shared presence, in the comfort of silent understanding, and in the gentle rhythm of their hearts learning to trust again. That night, she returned home with a heart lighter than it had ever been. She went to bed knowing that she had taken a journey from fear to courage, from loneliness to connection, from hiding to being fully herself. The world no longer felt threatening in the same way. It felt full of possibilities. She had learned that life could be lived with trust, that safety could coexist with vulnerability, and that someone who cared could make all the difference. In the quiet of her room, she reflected on everything she had experienced. The fear, the danger, the uncertainty, all of it had led to this moment of clarity and hope. She realized that trust, once broken or withheld, could be rebuilt with patience and care. She had seen it firsthand, in the actions and presence of someone who had promised to protect her heart and had kept that promise in every way possible. And in that promise, she had found the freedom to heal and the courage to embrace life fully. As the town slept under the soft glow of moonlight, she knew that her journey was just beginning. There would be more challenges, more moments of doubt, but she also knew that she could face them with strength, trust, and hope. The cowboy had shown her the way, not by taking over her life, but by walking beside her, allowing her to reclaim her own courage and joy. And in that quiet, steadfast companionship, she discovered the greatest gift of all, the ability to believe in safety, in trust, and in the goodness of people once more. And so, her story reached a new chapter, one filled with light, courage, and promise. The tears she had once hidden were now a symbol of strength. The fear that had once controlled her life was now tempered with hope. And in the presence of someone who had honored her heart and kept his promise, she finally knew what it meant to be truly safe, truly seen, and truly free.